So the next topic that we are going to discuss about under this topic of tribes is the colonial policies which were followed, which are oriented towards tribes. How exactly did Britishers treat tribes in this country? What were the official policies of the British government is what we are going to discuss. Now, the first thing that you have to remember is that the policy of colonial government towards tribes, it changed over a period of time. Till mid 19th century, you see that one type of policy is followed by the British government. Now, post mid 19th century, you see that there is a different type of policy which was followed by the British government. Now, till mid 19th century, the policy which was followed was a policy of intervention and reform. Policy of intervention and reform. That is, the British government or the colonial government actively tried to interfere in the affairs of tribal communities, and they tried to transform these tribal communities into a more modern community with humanitarian values. So the view which the Britishers had till mid 19th century was that the tribes or tribal communities in India, they are very backward, and they sort of worked with the view that these tribal communities practice certain barbaric practices like human sacrifice, which is why these tribal communities must be transformed. You have to introduce new values and new type of economic system into tribal communities. So this was their main intention or view, that is, these tribal communities represent a backward community within the Indian society, and they have to be transformed, and they follow certain barbaric practices which are not in line with modern day values, which again has to be transformed. And another important reason why Britishers tried to intervene in tribal communities is the economic considerations that they had. The more land they bring under cultivation, the more land revenue they can generate, which would help run their government, right? So they wanted more land revenue, which is why they made tribal communities practice settled cultivation, which was not existent till the Britishers came into picture. And they also introduced this concept of private ownership of land in order to collect land revenue. So they declared the tribal chiefs as owners of the land, and this concept of private ownership was completely alien to the tribal communities because they followed communal cultivation till then. Right? So these were some of the reasons why Britishers followed this policy of intervention and reform, because of the backwardness and because of some of the values which are not consistent with modernity, and also because of some economic considerations. And another important factor is the law and order factor. The Britishers viewed these nomadic tribes as those who are prone to crime, and they wanted to bring this problem under control, which is why they brought in Criminal Tribes Act in order to curtail the activities or the movement of tribes in India, right? So these were the factors which led to the interventionist policy of the Britishers till mid 19th century. These are the reasons for adoption, right? But the reason for change in the stance of Britishers post mid 19th century is that because of all these colonial policies, they were seeing lot of rebellions from the tribal communities, whether it is Santal rebellion or Coal uprising or Rampa rebellion. All these rebellions came into picture, and they were threatening the position of the colonial government, mainly because the tribes, when outsiders were introduced into their communities, started facing exploitation at the hands of these money lenders that the Britishers introduced in these communities. The problem of money lenders, and slowly tribes started losing control over their own land when they could not pay back these money lenders, and the tribal identity and culture was being threatened. Lot of outsiders came into the regions where tribals used to live. So all these factors generated lot of frustration among the tribal communities, and they started their rebellions against the colonial government. Since it was threatening the existence of colonial government, the policy was changed, and post mid 19th century, the policy which was followed is a policy of isolation, which you can see in terms of the inner line permit which colonial government introduced in northeastern areas, and also Scheduled Districts Act that they introduced post mid 19th century. This is because they wanted to address some of these problems and they also wanted to address the discontent which is present among tribal communities, so that rebellions would reduce. And this isolationist policy, another underlying motive is to shield away these tribal communities from the rising tide of nationalism in India. They did not want these tribes to join the broader nationalist movement which was going on in India. So this isolationist policy serves two purposes. One is to shield these tribal communities from participating in the nationalist movement, and also it would reduce the rebellions and the discontent among the tribal communities so that they would stop rebelling against the colonial government. These were the two reasons why the policy stance of the colonial government changed post mid 19th century. Okay, so these are the reasons for adoption. So what you see is an evolution in the colonial policy towards tribes. In the beginning of British period, what you see is interventionist policy and also policy to reform these tribal communities. Then slowly the stance changed to isolationist policy.